Dr. Jayraj's literary lens presents under Part 1, After Theories, Lecture 2, Affect Theory, Origins, Development and Application in Literary Studies. This lecture is prepared and presented by Dr. S. Joseph Arul Jayraj, former Head and Associate Professor of English, St. Joseph's College Autonomous, Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu, India. Introduction. Affect theory is used to understand emotions, feelings, and bodily responses as central components of human experience. Originally rooted in psychology and philosophy, affect theory has evolved into a significant approach in literary studies, enabling scholars to analyze how texts evoke emotional responses and shape human behavior. This talk explores the origins of affect theory, its transition to literary criticism, and its application in interpreting literature. Drawing on key theorists such as Silvan Tomkins, Brian Massumi, and Sara Ahmed, this talk clarifies how affect functions beyond personal emotion to become a social and cultural force. The talk concludes with specific literary examples and argues for the importance of affect theory in understanding the emotional dynamics of literary texts. In everyday life, people often talk about emotions, how a story made them cry, how a poem gave them chills, or how a character made them angry. In literature, these emotional responses are more than just personal reactions. They can reveal deeper truths about identity, society, and power. Affect theory offers a way to analyze these emotional responses not just as feelings, but as forces that shape human interactions and cultural meanings. While emotions are often seen as private experiences, affect theorists argue that they are also social, physical, and political. This talk explains the origins of affect theory, how it transitioned into literary analysis, and how it helps students and scholars interpret literary texts more deeply. Theory. Origins of affect theory. Affect theory began not in literature but in psychology and philosophy. Silvan Tomkins, a psychologist who lived in the 20th century, was one of the earliest and most influential figures in developing affect theory. Tomkins believed that human beings are driven by biological affects, innate, pre-conscious responses that include surprise, fear, anger, and joy. He argued that these effects are universal and foundational for human behavior. In his 4-volume work, Affect Imagery Consciousness, 1962 to 1992, Tomkins stated that affect is the biological and psychological mechanism of human motivation. According to him, every person experiences the same core affects, though they may express them differently based on culture and upbringing. Later, psychoanalyst Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick and anthropologist Adam Frank built on Tomkins' work, advocating for what they called affect studies as a new way of reading texts. In their 2003 essay, Shame in the Cybernetic Fold, Sedgwick and Frank emphasized that affects are not simply individual emotions, but are shaped by social systems and relationships. They encouraged scholars to pay attention to how emotions like shame, love, and fear operate in literature and culture. Affect versus emotion, a key distinction. To understand affect theory, it is important to distinguish affect from emotion. Affect is immediate, physical, and precognitive. It refers to the body's raw, involuntary response to stimuli. Emotion, on the other hand, is how we name, understand, and express affect through language and culture. For example, your heart might race when you read a suspenseful passage. That racing heart is affect. When you say, "I felt scared," you are turning that affect into an emotion. Brian Massumi, a philosopher and cultural theorist, explains this difference by saying that affect is not emotion, but the capacity to affect and be affected. This means that affect is about potential, how a body can respond to other bodies, texts, or environments. Massumi's work brings affect into discussions of power, politics, and social life, showing how literature can trigger bodily reactions that might not even be recognized as emotions. Practice: affect theory in literary studies. In the early 2000s, scholars began applying affect theory to literary analysis. This shift allowed critics to move beyond traditional interpretations that focused only on plot, character, or symbolism, and instead explore how texts make readers feel. Literary affect theory asks questions like, how does a poem generate a sense of longing? What bodily reactions does a horror novel provoke? How do feelings circulate among characters and readers? Sara Ahmed, a feminist scholar, made significant contributions to this field. In her book, The Cultural Politics of Emotion, 2004, she argued that emotions are not just inside individuals, but are shared across groups. She introduced the concept of sticky emotions, emotions that attach to certain bodies, objects, or places. For instance, she explains how fear is often directed towards immigrants or strangers, making them seem threatening even when they are not. Ahmed, 87. In literary terms, this means that feelings like love or hate are not neutral, they reflect and reinforce social norms. Ahmed also introduced the idea of affective economies, where emotions circulate like currency, gaining value in certain contexts. For example, in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, 1847, Jane's passion and anger are often seen as dangerous because she is a woman. But through the novel, these effects build her strength and independence. Analyzing this through affect theory helps readers see how emotions are disciplined by society, especially in relation to gender and class. Applications in literature. To see how affect theory works in practice, consider Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, 1818. Traditional readings often focus on the monster as a symbol of scientific overreach, but through affect theory we can examine the intense emotions the novel provokes in readers: horror, pity, and disgust. The creature's first moments are filled with sensory experiences. Light hurts his eyes, cold burns his skin, and voices confuse him. These are not emotions, but raw affects, bodily reactions to a new world. The creature says, "I was a poor, helpless, miserable wretch. I knew and could distinguish nothing, but feeling pain invade me from all sides, I sat down and wept." Shelley, 107. His tears are the beginning of emotion, a response to overwhelming affect. The reader, too, may feel pain, guilt, or sorrow for the creature. Affect theory helps us see that the horror in Frankenstein is not just about the monster's appearance, but about society's failure to respond with empathy. Similarly, in Toni Morrison's Beloved, 1897, affect theory is useful in understanding the legacy of trauma. The character Sethi is haunted not only by the ghost of her dead daughter, but also by the lingering effects of slavery, fear, grief, and guilt. These feelings are not confined to Sethi, they spread to other characters and even to the reader. As Morrison writes, freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of that freed self was another. The emotional weight of the novel is not just in its story, but in how it makes readers feel the pain of the past. Criticism and limitations. Despite its strengths, affect theory has faced criticism. Some scholars argue that it is too abstract and difficult to measure.
Others say it ignores language and narrative structure, focusing too much on bodily responses. Literary theorist Ruth Leys has questioned whether affect can truly be separated from emotion and cognition, suggesting that the distinction between them may be artificial. Leys 445. These critiques remind us that affect theory should be used alongside other methods, not as a replacement for traditional literary analysis, but as a supplement. Conclusion. Affect theory provides a powerful lens for understanding how literature moves us, not just in our minds, but in our bodies. Starting from psychological roots in the work of Silvan Tomkins, the theory was expanded by thinkers such as Massumi and Ahmed to analyse how feelings circulate within culture and shape human relationships.
In literary studies, affect theory helps readers explore not only what a text means, but also how it feels. Whether it is the dread in a Gothic novel or the grief in a memoir, affect theory allows students to connect emotion to social and political realities. As literature continues to reflect the complexity of human experience, affect theory offers tools to feel and understand those experiences more deeply. Thank you.